We saw, most people have seen, the murder in broad daylight of George Floyd, which has led to this protest and insurrectionary actions in Minneapolis that we were talking about in the beginning of the show. The fact, and this is nothing, there's nothing positive about this. I mean, it's stunning that they still have not faced murder charges, but you could really anticipate how horrifying this video was, that these people were fired immediately without even an attempt from Minneapolis Police Department to spin this. I mean, they were just let go. And you know, I don't know how to process those videos in terms of, clearly there's a lot of people that need to see these things. They need to understand that they happen. And I think it's also a lot of people, especially people who, like Black men, who are most likely to be on the receiving end of this type of murderous terrorism, don't necessarily need to, see a snuff film. But the point is that it was so clear, and Judge Napolitano on Fox News, who is, I guess actually particularly by Fox standards, is willing to sort of push back against some of the prevailing narratives on Fox. He's going to have a very clear take on this. And it's interesting. I mean, you'll see across right-wing media, obviously there's some of the just straight up racist and murder justifying sort of voices. Then there's the, hey, this was bad, but it has nothing to do with anything. It doesn't point to any large scale problems. And here is Judge Napolitano, I think, frankly, from a prosecutorial standpoint, making the most basic and obvious point here.
Make of this, will these officers be charged?
Well, of course they should be charged. I mean, if I were the Attorney General, and I applaud the president for suggesting, and of course he can do this with a phone call, ordering the FBI to investigate. But if I were the Attorney General, I would, Bill Barr would call up the Attorney General of Minnesota and say, why are those 4 officers why have they not been charged with murder? Why are they free? Why are they not in jail? We have a video of the murder. If you guys don't do it, we will. So there's 2 violations here. There's murder, and then there's the use of legal force to deprive him of his civil rights. The murder is the state crime. The use of force to deprive him of his civil rights, in this case, the right to breathe, is a federal crime. The cops can actually be prosecuted for both. As horrific as the response has been and as unjustified as these riots are, they're probably not going to stop until the cops are actually arrested.
All right, Judge, and we'll look at this. And by the way, the riots, the best.
That's amazing. So he feels a need to feed the Fox News narrative and reduce people's, first of all, obviously, most of the protests are just protests. They weren't, a lot of people who weren't engaging in anything were still hit with tear gas and rubber bullets. Then there's people who have been expressing rage by breaking windows of a precinct, which, these officers that committed this murder came from. So he feels a need to feed the dishonest racist narrative that Fox is going to try to shift the focus on. But he does do it in the context of saying exactly what the incident took place was, being shocked that charges haven't been filed yet. And charges absolutely need to be filed, both the state and federal charges he outlined well there. And then even at the end, even after he indulges the bullshit, quote unquote, riot narrative, he still basically is like, yeah, but this isn't going to stop till there's an arrest. So I mean, on the legal part, he actually just does that really well. But it's interesting watching somebody like how he is still working in bounds of this right-wing propaganda context to push a different narrative. A correct narrative, which is interesting.
Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, I don't know where the jurisdiction falls on this, but it's interesting. He mentions the AG, which is Keith Ellison, and I've been looking up
I don't think it. I think it isn't it the DA.
Does it fall
though?
to the DA? Yeah.
I think it falls. See, I'm going to assume because I think. I mean, look. Thank God Keith Ellison is the Attorney General of Minnesota. So I would assume. It's very good that he's there with regards to prosecuting this case, but I don't think I think actually the judge is wrong about that. I think the Minneapolis DA is the person who's going to be responsible, at least out of the gate, with putting charges forward.
Yeah, that's Michael O. Freeman.
Michael O. Freeman. And the mayor of Minneapolis himself has actually sort of publicly stated his shock that there hasn't been arrests yet. So, I mean, we don't know, but obviously we'll continue to follow closely. And of course, there needs to be murder charges here.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I also, though, rather than seeing cops punished after the fact, I don't want to see this happen anymore. We're all so sick of it. And it's disgusting that a lot of white people need to see it on video in order to believe it and in order to care about Black lives, right? Study after study and city after city has shown that the only way to substantially increase the safety of the public in poor neighborhoods and in Black and brown neighborhoods is to reduce the budgets of police departments and stop building new jails. And you can call it abolition, you can call it whatever you want to. A lot of people working for these policies are working within an abolitionist framework, just like socialism. That's a pie in the sky goal, but there are things we can do in the here and now to advance that goal. And that's always what I'm talking about when I talk about abolition, because I don't think any of us want to see this happen any more times.
Well, of course, absolutely. I'm not going to get into a whole sort of debate about it, but I'll just, you put forward what you think, and I'm going to just put forward in 30 seconds what I think, which is that never allow the slogans and the things that can easily be used to divert a conversation from really important, concrete reforms, changes, and material delivery be used to allow to subtract from those substantive goals. And a lot of slogans do that and serve that function when you're talking to a broader public across all racial backgrounds. The most police that I know personally are definitely people of color. And obviously, actually they have really complicated and mixed feelings about policing, as most people do. So the point is to leverage directly what can be done so that we actually achieve these urgent things that need to be achieved now, and we don't allow sloganeering to interfere with that. So that's also, it's fine.
I think the thing about the lowering the budgets gives us a lot to work with, though, because I think austerity for cops, or however we decide to frame that, is going to be going to be a pretty mass buy-in thing, especially on the progressive left.
So I agree with that. The concern then becomes the private militia and corporate aspect of it, because the context now and what we were talking about in the first half is looking at a place like LA, where LAPD has been somewhat, it's not as big as NYPD, and there's a lot more private security contracting. So in a context now where there's no actual policy movement, there's no power position to do that in terms of winding it down, the vacuum that will be filled is actually from private contractors that are even less accountable because they don't even have the theoretical public obligation. So we need to just be really careful and specific about it, and absolutely 1,000,000% push for those policy changes against police violence and surveillance, period. I mean, one of the things also when you look at the numbers, in addition to the obvious racism, is also the class dimension that occurs across the board, and also the fact that the United States has unusually and deeply violent policing across the board, and people are deeply over surveilled, and we need to take all of that on.
Yeah, and that's why this is not a fringe issue, abolition or whatever you want to call it.
Well, let's make it not a fringe issue by, being really thoughtful with the language. But of course, these implications, these things, of course not. I mean, and nothing, and nothing that affects, the ability of life of any part of the population is a fringe issue. Of course not. Do you guys want